part of a global call for action.
We know there are many culprits: corporations, policymakers, mass consumption. But what if there was one single entity that by itself will bring planetary collapse? One single organization, one single enemy, that not only produced enough toxic destruction to destroy the planet on its own, but was also subject to virtually no regulations, no oversight, no accountability, and as of yet, no blame. If there was a monster like that, shouldn't it be dragged out of the dark and into the center of the struggle to save the planet?
Majority leader of the other party say, quote, a time of war. When I sat with the majority leader in a rules committee meeting upstairs, and he said, we're at war, and I'm wondering when we voted to go to war. If we're going to have a proxy war and we're going to give $40 billion to Ukraine because we want to look all fancy with our blue and yellow ribbons and feel good about ourselves, maybe we should actually have a debate in this chamber, a debate in this body, because the American people expect us to do that. When the border of this country is wide open and cartels have control of it and fentanyl is pouring in and we have $30.5 trillion of debt and gas prices are spiking and $1,100 to fill a tank of diesel, and we go, oh, blank check, $40 billion. And by the way, I'm looking at my colleagues on this side of the aisle on that same point.
It was a very dangerous situation. Early to mid-1980s when the Soviet Union and the United States began introducing what we call intermediate nuclear forces. What made them especially dangerous was, for instance, in the Soviet case, the SS-20 had 3 warheads, and they had hundreds of these missiles. So if there was going to be a war in Europe, every single major European city would be destroyed. I just want to say that one more time so it sinks in. Every single major European city in Europe will be destroyed if there was a war. The United States responded by deploying its own missiles, a cruise missile, Tomahawk, and then the ground-launched cruise missile, and then the Pershing II. The thing about the Pershing II is that once it was launched from its base in Germany, it could hit Moscow in 7 to 10 minutes, meaning that there's no time for anybody to make a decision, no time to think. If a launch was detected, you're going to hit the button and fire everything, which means not just every single major city in Europe, but every single major city in the United States would have been evaporated within 45 minutes. The world ends.
There's no imminent threat to the safety, security, and freedom of the United States coming to us from Russia. In fact, there's no imminent threat or even long-term threat of Russia invading Finland or Sweden. What we do know is that the Biden administration has failed to clearly define any objective in this proxy war in Ukraine. They have failed to define what winning looks like. So clearly there is no end in sight without that being defined. We can look at Afghanistan and Iraq as very recent examples of what happens when you don't have that clearly defined mission. And so the American people were struggling with high inflation, basic necessities that people need to live, costs increasing. And yet with this $40 billion of funding and what will come next and next and next, the American people deserve to know what this will cost us financially, what it will cost our economy, and what it will cost our national security with the increased potential of a nuclear conflict if this is allowed to continue.
This wasn't a joke, ladies and gentlemen. This was real. We lived it 24/7. I was raised in Germany. We lived in a German village next to a nuclear weapons depot. If there was a war, that would be one of the first targets hit. So every morning as a child, I woke up wondering if I was going to get the 200,000 degree suntan, which is basically what happens when a nuclear bomb goes off and the heat flash hits you. The United States and the Soviet Union, or what we call Russia today, on the cusp of a war that could terminate life as we know it in the world. Now, the Cold War ended. It didn't just end on its own. One of the things I did as a Marine was not only trained to kill the Soviets, but I also was the first inspector sent to the Soviet Union in 1988 to implement the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty that got rid of those missiles I was telling you about. So there was a recognition on the part of the United States and the Soviet Union that these missiles represented an existential threat to the survival of the world, and they agreed to get rid of them. We did this. And because of that, we developed this trust that led to, a reduction of tension. And then the Soviet Union fell, the Warsaw Pact went away, and one would have thought that this was a perfect opportunity for a framework of peace to break out all over Europe. But the United States and the Europeans decided to keep NATO in place. And NATO transformed into something that it wasn't originally envisioned to be. It was originally envisioned to be a defensive organization, a defensive alliance, and then became an alliance that now had European security as its mission, and that included offensive military action. We saw that in 1999 against the Serbs. We saw that in 2011 against the Libyans, and on and on and on. So the situation we find ourselves in today is, instead of the world being a safer place after going through this horrific period of time in the 1980s, it's like we've gone back in time. It's like a Michael J. Fox movie. We got in our DeLorean and we went too fast and poof, we're back in time. Because once again, we have NATO facing off against a Russian military capability. And now the United States, having withdrawn from the INF Treaty in 2019, is talking about sending intermediate nuclear missiles back to Europe to recreate the exact same situation that we got rid of in the 1980s. Now, what's worse is that in the Cold War, it was called a Cold War because we never really got into a shooting match. Today, we have a hot war. Today, we have an actual large-scale ground combat going on in the largest European country. And it's a war that has already invoked the specter of nuclear weapons, with Russia saying that if NATO interferes, that represents an existential threat, and Russia may have to use nuclear weapons in response. So now NATO, for the first time, is talking about what its nuclear strike policy is. So we have two sides actively preparing for nuclear war as we speak. Ladies and gentlemen, the stakes couldn't get any higher.
And we keep coming along to the same stories about Ukraine shelling the civilians here. We're trying to find someone that will agree with the Western media, mainstream media's narrative that it's Russia firing on civilian neighborhoods, but we just can't find it.
Представителям иностранных западных стран, вот нам представитель прессы помогает. Нам и продуктами, и все. А обратиться к представителям стран хочу. Не надо поставлять Украине оружие. Нас просто этим оружием убивают. Хотят Донбасс сравнять с лица земли. За что? Я не понимаю, за что. Разрушают. Мой дом вот разрушили. Зажигалки летели, все. Оружие именно то, что поставляется. Большое, натовское. Зачем? Если
И не
было...
дают тушить.
И не дают тушить. Зачем? Если бы не было этой поставки этого оружия, я думаю, это уже все давно бы закончилось. Все бы это порешали на мирной основе. Но любая война, плохой мир хуже, лучше плохой войны, как говорится.
Why is this happening? Did Russia wake up one morning and say, I want to invade Ukraine? I just want to destabilize the world and go for it. Or has Russia been reacting to the failure of NATO to dissolve itself at the end of the Cold War and instead expand itself eastward in a manner that Russia viewed as a threat? And this isn't a threat that Russia only recently talked about. We know that Russia has raised the expansion of NATO continuously since the 1990s. The National Security Archives has the audio tapes of the phone calls from President Clinton and then President Yeltsin, where Yeltsin is begging Clinton not to expand NATO. This puts me in a bad light, he said. This is an embarrassment. I lose face with my people. And Clinton said, sorry, we're expanding NATO anyways. Vladimir Putin, when he became president, said, hey, rather than just expanding NATO, why don't you invite me in? And that way we don't have to worry about it. We'll make it one big happy club. And the United States wouldn't do it because NATO's purpose was to contain Russia, not absorb Russia. This expansion of NATO has been viewed by Russia as a threat. We know this. In 2007, Putin spoke at the Munich Security Conference, gave an outstanding speech, one of the best examples of modern political rhetoric anywhere. One of the things he said is that this expansion of NATO represents an existential threat. It's a red line. How do we know this? William Burns, you might know that name right now. He's currently the director of the CIA. At the time, in 2008, he was the U.S. ambassador to Russia. He wrote a memorandum called "Niet means Niet," no means no, articulating what the Russian position was in regards to NATO expansion. He said it's a red line and the Russians mean it. They view this as an existential threat. If you continue to expand NATO, and here's the important thing, he wrote this in February 2009, if you continue to push for the expansion of NATO, Russia will have no choice but to invade Ukraine, and Ukraine will lose at a minimum the Crimea and the Donbass. He predicted the future. Maybe that's why he's the director of the CIA today, but he predicted the future accurately. No one can say we didn't know. We knew, and yet we continued to do this. And we pushed Russia into a corner until last December. They said enough is enough. They sent 2 draft treaties demanding a restructuring of the European security framework, and they demand that Ukraine opt out of NATO, become neutral. They said, we're not joking. Take this seriously. If you don't take this seriously, we will have no choice but to undertake what they call the military technical option. They weren't taken seriously. The United States and Europe ignored them, belittled them, mocked them.
But let's see what they say on the other side, Lysychansk, about what the situation is. You would think that they might have a different story because the Ukrainian forces and the Ukrainian government has been saying, in pro-Ukrainians, that people that are in Russian-controlled territory say these things because maybe they're scared. They're scared of the Russians, so they say Ukraine shells civilian areas. But yesterday, France 24 did a report in Lysychansk about who was shelling there. They talked to the civilians as we talk to the civilians here. And even in Ukraine-controlled territory, those people said that it's Ukraine shelling the civilian areas. Now, don't take my word for it. Let's look at the France 24 report right now.
Some 15,000 of Lysychansk's residents are determined to stay in the city that now finds itself at the center of Russia's war with Ukraine. Pro-Russian civilians stand in the way of Ukrainian troops who are trying to evacuate residents. Tensions are high.
It's deportation. Deportation. Don't you see? They're kicking us out.
Ukrainian troops are faced with suspicion from the pro-Russian civilians who were told by Kyiv's army they have 2 days to leave the city.
You're going to make us live under tents? Is that what you want?
Half accepted to leave, the others returning to their homes. Even despite the danger, this house was shelled 2 days ago. In Lysychansk, the majority who have stayed here are not in favor of Ukraine's army. They do not believe that Moscow is attacking the city and want Putin's army to be victorious in the war.
It's the Ukrainian army who are shooting at us. They are the ones killing our children.
We want to be united with the Russians. They're our friends, not the Germans in Europe. I want the Russians to win, because they'll take power here.
Что произошло там? Именно.
Ну вот там вот до начала стоял миномет. Стреляли отсюда, в жилом доме, в жилом дворе. Этот дом прилетел сначала в соседский снаряд, вот оттуда, потом в мой дом, от украинцев, со стороны Украины. А третий, ну, видимо, пристреливались, попал Андреев дом.